5 years ago I made a video about an unusual Akai cassette deck that had a very complicated auto-reverse mechanism. Now at the start of that video I said this. This is one of Philips' early attempts at an auto-reverse mechanism, and the idea with this one is, once it's finished playing the tape, it fires it up a plastic ramp, it hopefully slides back down that ramp, and with the wind in the right direction and your fingers crossed, it'll locate back in the machine and play the other side. Now understandably, after I said that, quite a few people wanted to see that Philips mechanism in action. And indeed you can count me amongst that list. I'd been looking for one for myself for quite a few years. But they're quite hard to get hold of. There weren't many of them sold, I don't think. It wasn't a particularly popular device, and then of course you've got the factor of these things getting on for 50 years old now. Anyway, recently I managed to get hold of one, although it's not working, or it wasn't. In this video you'll see a section where I attempt to repair it, and then at the end there'll be a demonstration of what I managed to get working. So if you want to just skip to that bit, feel free. But this is the one I got hold of. It's a Philips N2401. This dates from 1970. Now the model I showed you in those pictures was a slightly later one, and that was from I think 1974. It was a bit of a revision to this, but they both operate in a very similar manner. Doesn't look particularly exciting there, does it? I mean, it's just a kind of boring early 1970s cassette deck with a top-loading cassette mechanism. It gets interesting though if at the time you were to go and buy yourself one of these. This is the Philips Ski Slope, as it's affectionately known, or on the back it says it's the N6711. So you combine the N6711 with the N2401 and you get yourself quite a unique cassette-based experience. So let's get on with it. When this model came out in 1970, it was really still quite early days for hi-fi cassette decks. After all, Philips had only added stereo into the format in 1966, and the machines of this period had this similar top-loading layout. The looks of the N2401 really didn't stand out from the rest of the models that were on sale during this period. But we'll just take a quick look around the machine. So of course it is stereo, it's got the usual tape counter and recording level indicator. The controls are pretty standard other than the fact the play key here is labelled start and also doubles as a reject button, more on that later. And the key to its right with the downward pointing triangle above a line, that's the pause button. From the controls on the right you can see that this cassette deck has its own built-in amplifier, meaning it can be used as a standalone device when it's connected up to speakers using the sockets on the back. However, it can also be connected up to an existing hi-fi via the DIN plugs. On the bottom there's a switch to select the voltage, but in North America this model was sold by Philips under the Norelco brand, as they weren't allowed to use the Philips name there due to its similarity to Philco. Right, that's all the normal stuff ticked off. Now let's look at what makes this particular machine different. You'll notice the spindles are recessed at the moment. They're able to drop down inside the machine, and this is so the tape can slide out of position and travel under the central bar and get deposited in this bin on the right hand side. And it's this mechanism that enables the machine to play a stack of cassettes. The player would come with this plastic box that attaches to the top and allows automatic playback of one side of 6 cassettes. But if you wanted to automatically play both sides of those cassettes without getting up to turn them over and reload them back in the top, then you'd want to buy the optional ski slope attachment. But of course I'm getting ahead of myself here, as I can't demonstrate any of this until I manage to get the machine working. Now as it stands at the moment, it will turn on, the VU meter lights up and the spindles inside turn, but that's as far as it goes. Even with a tape in place, it refuses to do anything at all. So of course I'm going to open it up and see if I can get it to do something. Now the 4 screws in the base were a bit of a fiddle to get out, as they're all flat heads and they're recessed down the end of a long tube. I was thinking it was a bit ironic that Philips chose not to use Philips screws, but of course they are different companies. The screw people have 2 L's in the name. I'm just filling in time here with irrelevance while I get it open, but as you can see we're now inside, and is often the case, there's still not a great deal to see initially. All the belts are still hidden away, so I decided to remove the centre plastic piece here just to give myself a little bit more access. Now with another machine I took apart, once I'd removed this section I was able to see how it all fitted together. It's not the case in this one, it just covers up another panel unfortunately, but I don't know if you saw there, a little spring went flying off and landed in the bin. And it was only when I watched this footage back that I could see where that spring had come from. So the fact I was videoing this really helped me out when it came to putting this thing back together again. But you can see here with that plastic cassette well unscrewed and removed and placed out of the way, I really don't have any more access than I had before. So I'll need to move on and try something else. One thing I have noticed with it powered up, if I press the play key, it is activating a solenoid there at the top. But that is about all that's happening at the moment. Sometimes things are fun to work on, but this is not one of those occasions. I need to get access to the other side of this to see exactly what's going on with the belts and things. I'm going to put the top back on because a couple of springs popped off. There's all sorts of complicated bits in here. So I'll explain what this is here. This is the sled type mechanism. So what this does, it slides under the cassette, and this part on the top here is spring loaded. I don't know if you can see that. So that pops up. So once it goes underneath the cassette, it pops up and then it can drag the cassette out and put it into this bin here. This is pulled along by a string. The string at the moment is under tension from this spring here. So it's not pulled from this direction, it's pulled from underneath. I've noticed the string doesn't quite go on the middle of this pulley either. It keeps dropping down the side of it. That might be an issue. Also, we've got a micro switch type thing here. There's another one there, and there's a further one in the back of this mechanism here. So this is the one that tells the device that there's a cassette in place, I think. That one there is the one that tells it if the record mechanism has been activated. That was a bar that kind of goes down and is spring loaded. Oh, there's all these bits to put back already. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare of a thing. That one, I think that's the one to tell it when the cassette is cleared, so it can then put another cassette down. I think that's what that one's for. Wow, what a thing. Anyway, I'm cleaning it up. I've put some contact cleaner on all the micro switches, but that's really all I can do on this side. I'm pretty clueless. I'm going to turn it over and see if I can figure any of the other side out. So it was at this point I went back and looked at the footage of me taking that top section out to see where that spring had come from, and once I got it connected back in position, which was easier said than done, I then took out the 4 screws that were holding the chassis to the base and carefully flipped it over. Right, now there's a couple of things going on in here that I don't really understand, but there's a couple that I can also see are definitely wrong and I can quite easily fix. So first off, we got the belts. This goes from that wheel to that one, and then from there to there. But there's also another belt at the back here that's clearly fallen off, and that should be going around that wheel there onto this one here. So I can put that back on. Now, I've bought a set of belts, but some of these look quite tricky to replace. I mean, some you could just sort of put the belt underneath and around, but this one here particularly, it's supposed to go over there and under there, and I'm not sure how all this would come off. The thing with it is, though, the belts, you know what, they're really springy. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not sticky at all. They're not dried up. Maybe someone replaced them not too long ago. So I'm just going to try popping that belt back on that wheel at the back there, see if that fixes that. But the other thing is to do with the string. This is the string here. It goes up to the top there. This is the thing that pulls that little sled across that moves the cassette in and out. Well, it's attached up here to this large wheel. So no doubt this turns and pulls that string. Actually, it'll turn that way to pull the string. Now the string goes down to the bottom here. It's not particularly easy to see from the angle that you're at, but it's fallen off its 2 wheels here. There's one there and there's another one there. So the idea is it goes round that one, over that one, and then through to the other side of the case. As it is, it's gone behind this one here on the right and down the side of the other one as well. So I can pull that through from the other side, get a bit of that slack that's on the spring and relocate this where it should be. Hopefully that means the eject mechanism will work again. Right, now the more I look at this, the more I realise that someone's had a go at this and they've given up, which is a bit worrying. But I'll tell you what makes me think that. I don't know if you can see on the inside of this plastic wheel here, these black lines, those are the remnants of the old belt that was on here that melted and turned to black tar. So at some point someone's taken those belts out and replaced them with these. I thought they were really decent quality, so these have recently been replaced. There's another bit of belt left on the counter mechanism here that is quite tricky to replace, because you'd have to take a belt from there to this part in the middle, which is completely buried down there. I'm not sure how you'd ever even get to that. So that's why they haven't done the counter belt. It was just too complicated. But one thing they have done is they've put this belt on here. And this was the one that made me realise something's gone wrong, because I think it's supposed to go from this wheel here to underneath this wheel. And they've kind of threaded it around a couple of things and given up, because I mean, at the position it is at the moment, it could never have got itself in that position, because it's going over this bracket here, but it's going under it at the back, so that definitely would not work. And I've also got to mention, I downloaded the service manual. People always say, oh, get the service manual, that'll be dead easy. Yeah, look at that. I mean, flipping heck, I can't figure that out. I've been staring at this thing for half an hour, just trying to work out which belt goes where, and I can see there's 3 of them, and then the 4th one is this one up here for the counter. But it really doesn't give you an awful lot of help as to which belt goes where. Now there is a little bit further on which has another diagram there. So that's the motor going to that belt. Well, we've got that one on. This one going down here under the big flywheel. Well, we've got that one on. So it's this other one going like that we need to sort out. Oh, these things here I've got to show you. They were sponges at one point, so that when you put the 2 halves together, it fits together nicely and doesn't rattle around. Well, just look at them now. It's the same stuff they make those pads out of on 8-tracks, and it's just turned to dust. So it would have been kind of a sponge type material, but yeah, I'm going to have to vacuum that out of it later on. While we're here, let's just look at the belt kit that I got for this machine. I just want to see how many belts there are supposed to be. Yeah, I think there's 4 in there. So the one that I'm replacing now, I might swap out with one of these if I can find the right length. Yeah, so there we go. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, so there's 4 belts. At least I know I'm not going mad. So my plan with this belt, to get it in the right position, was to remove this clip, which should enable me to take apart the linkage and feed the belt underneath. Now, to stop that clip pinging off and vanishing, I'm putting a bit of white tack behind it. Other colours of tack are available, and I hope this is going to catch it when I pull that clip apart with a couple of screwdrivers. Now, with that out of the way, the arms can come apart at the pivot. There are a couple of plastic washers in here that I've moved out of the way because I didn't want to lose them. And then I removed the loose belt that was in the machine and replaced it with a new one that I got in my belt replacement kit off eBay. The process was complicated because of the difficult access, but eventually I managed to get everything back where it should be with no mishaps, and this particular part of the repair is now done. Okay, I think I can get the counter belt on after all. So this is the wheel it needs to go to here that's out of focus, but that's the one we're looking at over there. Now if I put my hand underneath this, you can see I can spin that, and that's because that's attached to the left spindle. So if I take that plate off again that I've just spent so long putting back on the top, make sure I clean off any gunk on these, I can send the belt through from that side, loop it around there, and then pull it across onto this wheel here. So might as well do that. I don't know if this thing's going to work, but at least it's going to have a set of belts in it. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, I now realise that I shouldn't have been so quick to put this part back on the machine earlier on. But of course, hindsight is 20/20, and it's 2021 now. Okay, so this is the one I need access to. The belt goes around that yellowed piece of plastic at the bottom there. I'm just going to clean it off first with some isopropyl alcohol because it's still got quite a bit of belt residue on there. Right, I've tried normal Q-tips. They're a bit big, so these are pointed. These are specially designed for cleaning things, not just for sticking in your ears. So these should be a little bit better at getting this stuff out of the tiny gap on there. Yeah, you can see that. Look at that. Doing a much better job. It's going to take me quite a few of these to clean all that out. Okay, so we've finally got there. Now I can send this belt down through this hole here, and hopefully I'll be able to retrieve it from the other side. Now before I close this up, I just wanted to show you this down here. I was thinking, how the heck am I supposed to get a belt round there? But I think that is an alternative wheel to go on here for if you're putting this in a country with a 60 Hertz power supply rather than a 50. You'd unscrew that from there and swap it out with that one. And yes, it turns out on closer inspection that the installed wheel does in fact have 50 Hertz written on it. Now this bar fits in the top of here. It's a bit of a nuisance to get this in. This is all part of the right protect mechanism. So the idea is at the top of your tape here, it will push this bar upwards, and that means if it can push it up, the right protect notch hasn't been pulled out, and then this pulls a piece down here which goes under the record lever, and on the end of there there's a section that sticks up, so if it's in this down position here, you're unable to press the record button, whereas if it slides up you should be able to press it. And that connects to the end of the bar by this pole here. So effectively all that's happening is once the tape is okay to record on, it pulls the piece up and away from the record button, and then once you can't record on it because someone's pulled out that right protect notch, there's a spring that keeps flying off which is supposed to pull this back down and underneath that record button. Okay, it's day 2 now, and I do think I'm getting somewhere, slowly. The belt at the back here that was driving this large wheel, it was slipping. I didn't realise, it looked like it was moving, but it wasn't. And therefore the whole mechanism wasn't working as it should do. It wouldn't do a full rotation. You might notice there's an arrow on here, and that shows the direction that the wheel is supposed to turn. Now, of course, that is just for someone repairing it. That arrow doesn't need to be there for the customer normally. So they're expecting you to have a look in here. I'm not surprised given the kind of rather unusual mechanism that it uses. Lots of different components just to move a tape around. But anyway, I think I've got that working, but I'm not going to close it up yet because I need to put a belt on this mechanism. The one I put on there, I thought it was all right, but the trouble is this whole part here moves up and down, and in the process of doing that, the belt just fell off again. So obviously it wasn't tight enough. So I'm going to have one more go at putting a belt, and I found one that I think is the right size. It's got enough springiness in it as well, because some of the others were a little bit hard, I think, and that's why it fell off. Right, now I'm still not sure whether or not this is going to work. I'll only find out once I put it back together. I've put this top half back down in the case because part of it is that this is driven by gravity. You see this thing here? This should be in the down position at the moment, but because I've got this slanted up, it's gone the other way. This is the motor, and it's the flywheel here, and it is designed to go down at a certain point so the cassette can slide out of the way, and then it moves up into the cassette and the two spindles move into the holes on the cassette. So I'll have to tilt it to demonstrate this next feature to you, but you can see how the belt that goes up to the timer up here, the counter I should say, that moves with this. It's pulling on a thing underneath here, so that's why it was popping off before. If it falls off again, I'm going to give up on that because I've spent enough time on that. It took me, I don't know, about another half hour to get it back on there. There's also a lot of things in here that it's relying on, little tiny things, like a little micro switch type thing here, or leaf switch I should say. There's another one up here with loads of different bits on as well, that depending upon the position of this, it'll press various parts of this. There's multiple parts it could press. It just tells it which position the wheel is. So let's just tilt it down. I'll try not to get electrocuted, and I'll just switch it on. I just want to show you what it's doing when it's working. So here we go. Right, now I'm going to press the button to reject a tape, and just watch the top half move. There you go. It pulls it round and it clicks into that position there, and I think that's where it will be playing the tape. But let's reject that tape. And again, this has dropped down now, and then it should pop back up again. At least I think that's the idea. Let's try it again. So that should be up there like that now, and then we'll do it like this, and it moves down. And my question is whether or not it's going to move back into position. I really don't know until we put it back together again. So let's put this top half on, but yeah, it all seems to kind of be working. Right, now I'm going to switch it on, we'll see what happens. Right, there's a click there, and I think this is the point where I could put a cassette in. So if we imagine there's a cassette in here now, and we click start, watch this sled thing move across. Now that would be the tape playing, this would be folded down underneath the tape. So now pretend I reject that tape, it moves across, It flips up, slides across and drops the tape down into the bin. Now that all seemed to work, didn't it? So let's just try it with a cassette in place. So I'm going to pop my cassette in here. It's a weird cassette loading mechanism. You kind of drop it on it, but without it going into the spools there. So let's start this tape. Hallelujah. That seems to be moving. Yeah, excellent. Now at this point, this tape should be playing. Oh, also look, the tape counter's moving. That thing that was my enemy for a couple of hours or so. So that seems to be okay. In fact, let's try fast forwarding. Yeah, that's working. Rewind. Oh wow, it's all working, all the features. Now I've got some extra short tapes, so I'm just going to run this one to the end and see if it does what it should do, which I think should get to the auto stop position and just bin the tape over here. So let's find out. Okay, now it got to the end of the tape, but it hasn't chucked it out. Let's reject it and see if that works. Oh, hello, stop. What's going on, Governor? We seem to have an issue. Let's just stop there. Okay, well that was fun, wasn't it? What is it catching on? It's catching on something, isn't it? Okay, we're edging closer and closer. The last thing that I think is causing an issue is the bar for the recording protection mechanism. As it stands, it moves up into this position at the top for the tape to go in and out, but it's still leaving enough of the rod here at the top, which is spring loaded, just to catch in the top of the tapes. Now if it's a tape that you can record on, not a problem, because it should push it out of the way, but if it's a pre-recorded tape, it's catching in the hole at the top. So I just need to find a way just to move that like a fraction of a millimetre further up. And I think the best option is to get this bar here that's pointing down like that and just bend it a little bit more so it faces kind of that angle, because it's pushing against this bar underneath here. That's what pushes it up. And I just think a little tiny fraction of a difference on that will mean that it clears at the top. I'm hoping that's done it. Let's find out. Right, so this is what we're keeping our eye on at the top. We just want to make sure this moves out of the way. So let's find out now. That's popped in there, so let's reject it. Yeah, I don't know. Let's put a tape in and find out. Now, if you've ever attempted to repair anything, I'm sure you'll be more than familiar with this part of the process. Everything seems to be going so well, and then for some reason, just before the end, it decides to stop working completely. I think it somehow got itself stuck between modes. It wasn't sure whether it should be playing a tape or loading one, but anyway, after a bit of fiddling around, well, more than a bit, it managed to start up again. So let's give that another go. You get the feeling with some pieces of electronics that they really just want to die, and that's the feeling I'm getting with this, but I'm refusing to let it go. I'm not going to pull the plug. Let's try again. Right, so we're playing the tape. Now, let's reject that tape and see what happens. Yes, it's cleared the thing, and it's in the bucket. Wow, is that it? Are we working? How's my counter going? I didn't notice that before. Let's just reset it. So, cassette in, start. Why's my counter not going? Don't tell me that belt's fallen off again. It's ridiculous if it has. Okay, I put the counter belt on yet again, but that's it now. I refuse to do it ever again, because you can see it's just going to come straight off. Look, it's been pulled against the top of that wheel there. It's very tight, but it's just going to ping off there, isn't it? Because this thing goes up and down, this mechanism here, and the one at the front stays flat. So we get this angle between the two, and it's just going to pop off the top of there again. Ah, hold on a minute. I've just realised there's another wheel under there. At the bottom, that's where it can go, that's where it won't fall off. So why has this got black around it then? That must have had some kind of belt around it. I feel like I'm missing something here, but anyway, I'm going to put the belt around that bottom section. That means it shouldn't fall off. Incidentally, the reason I didn't see that earlier on is because as the mechanism moves down, it hides that bottom part of the spindle. So I've only noticed it now when it's in its utmost position. But I think that's everything done in here. Let's put it back together and hopefully I can now give you a demonstration. Oh, before I put it back together, I thought I should mention you can see a date here on the motor of 1972. Right, let's put the lid on. Well, that was fun. Yeah, not really. Kind of a bit of a fiddly job. Frustrating at times. I'm not particularly good at repairing things. I'm just some guy who has a tinker with things. I'll play around with them, hoping to get them working just enough to be able to show them in a video to give you an idea as to how this thing once was supposed to work. And that's what I've managed to do with this. I've got it up to a level where I can demonstrate it now, and that's what this video was about. Sometimes people will get in touch with me and say, I'll tell you what, I've just bought something that's broken off eBay. I'll send it to you, you repair it in a video and then send it back to me. Yeah, not going to happen. I'm not that good at repairing stuff. I don't really have the time to be repairing things for other people. You can imagine if I'd been on the clock for this. Well, I've spent virtually a week trying to get a tape recorder working. How much is that if you charge minimum wage per hour? It's going to be very expensive, a lot more than the thing's worth. So yeah, these kind of things you can only really do yourself. Right, it's finally time to demonstrate this mechanism working now. I've been playing around with it a little bit and it is temperamental. It doesn't always work, and that's down to age, of course. I'm sure it would have been better when it was new. For example, the cassettes don't always drop down properly into here, which means it just gets stuck. But I've found out that it works best with 6 cassettes. You can get 7 in at a squeeze, but one of them tends to get stuck up here sometimes. And I think it's designed for 6. So I'm going to use 6 tapes here. Now, I'm using tapes that have a different colour on each side. I ordered these especially for this, and that's so that when I demonstrate it, you can see once they've all been played and then flipped over to the other side. So let's pop them all in with the red side upwards to start with. So I'm putting all 6 in here now. But just think, if you've got 6 cassettes and they're 90 minutes each, that means you've got 9 hours worth of audio here. So it will play 9 hours worth of music or whatever before it gets around to the beginning again and repeats itself. Now, it shows these things being used in a party. I can't think many people would really want that much music. I have heard about these being used as background music machines, which does tend to make a little bit more sense. But let's switch it on. Now, I've got most of these tapes wound to the end of the first side, the red side, so they should automatically reject and move on to the next one. One of the problems with the machine is the auto stop doesn't always kick in. There's a sensor on the take-up reel, there's a cam that hits a sensor over and over again, and the machine is supposed to recognise when that pulse isn't being sent and then say, right, we've reached the end of the tape, and move on to the next one. It doesn't always do it. It's a little bit temperamental, and it's something that is known about. I've seen other people repairing them. They've had a similar issue. So we're just going to leave that for the moment. I'm going to be the auto stop. I'm going to press the button. So let's pretend that this is the machine recognising the end of the tape. So in a minute you'll see it pop up here. Now, I've got to say it's making some pretty horrible noises, and that's because of the dampening. It's all lost a lot of its sponges and things that perished over time, so those would need replacing if you were to use this properly. But that's the first tape. We'll move on now. Tape 2's played and finished, and it should move up into this position here. Here's where they've got stuck again. So in a minute it'll start working a little bit better. Right, so we've got our first 2 tapes that have played. It's playing the third one now, and it gets to the end of the third one, moves that one up the ramp here. These are supposed to drop down, and then that one goes on the top. So you can see now we've got side B on that one, and as they work their way around, you'll see it pops its way out of the top here and then throws itself down the ramp. The actual movement of these pushing down on the other ones does help it to keep itself going. So once I've got it cycled, it does tend to work a little bit better than it did when there's nothing on top. But there you go. That's pretty much the mechanism working. That's what we've been waiting for all this time. So, that one has auto stop there, I think. Yeah, and it's moved on itself. So I think we're all on the yellow sides of these now, and of course that won't auto stop because it's wound back to the beginning of the yellow side, so you'd have to wait for the tape to finish. So I'll eject that one now, and you should see a yellow tape popping up through here. There we go. So that's it, it would just continue on like that until you told it to stop. Now the stop button here, what that does, if I press it, it will move a tape out of the way, but it won't move on to the next one. And it will just click off. At least that's the idea. So it's ready to play the next one, but it shouldn't be playing it yet. No, it's stopped there. So there you go, that's the mechanism working. Took a lot of effort, that, didn't it? I thought it might be a good idea to look into the price of this back when it was new. So here it is with a couple of other models from the Philips range, and in my opinion it's already looking a little bit out of date by this point compared to the other two machines that have moved on to a sleeker design. You can also see the speakers in this picture, which would have been bundled with the machine. Now here's an advert from 1971 that lists the recommended retail price of the N2401 as £103, and they're discounting it to £90.60. So if we waz that lower amount into the inflation calculator, it comes out as approximately £1,300 in today's money. It's interesting to see from these adverts though how new this hi-fi cassette deck category was at this point. This is 1972 we're looking at, and the tape recorder category at the top is for the open reel machines. The cassette recorders, they just make up this smaller section down at the bottom. If we look closer at that, we can see that by 1972 the prices for the N2401 had plummeted down to £65. Now this is the same retailer who was listing them at £90 just a year earlier. With inflation, that's still £877 though nowadays. You can see also by 1972 the deck had been relegated in the Philips catalogue to a tiny picture. However, Philips did try one more time to sell their changer mechanism with the 2408, which came out in 1974. This time though, the brochures were positioning that machine more as a background music player for commercial environments rather than something that you might use at home. You can see it in the example photo now, rather than showing it at a party, they've got it on the end of a bar. That N2408 went on to be discontinued in 1976, and that marked the end of the Philips ski slope machines. It was a solution to a problem that few people needed solving. However, it's such an unusual and eye-catching design, somewhere half between a child's toy and a hi-fi component, that you can't help but want to see one in action. It even made a brief appearance in the 2016 documentary about the cassette when Lou Ottens, credited as the creator of the cassette, pointed it out at a Philips museum, stating that the cassette changers had never been a big success. Of course, if it had been a big success with every home having one, then there would have been little point in me going to all the effort to feature it in this video. Oh, and for the sake of completeness, I might as well show you how it works with the other cassette loader tray, the one that can only play one side of the cassettes automatically. I believe this one was bundled with the machine, so again, just like the first, it holds 6 cassettes. It's not as exciting to watch, but it will automatically play its way through all those cassettes, one after the other, depositing them in the bin on the right-hand side. Now, if we just consider this as a normal tape recorder, well, it's pretty typical of a machine of its time with the top-loading cassette mechanism. It's not the kind of thing you could put in a rack of equipment, and it doesn't really have the performance that the later machines would have done. It's also a little bit odd in its operation. For example, if I've got a cassette here and I want to fast forward into the middle of it, well, I can't at the moment. I have to press start to bring the spools up into the reels, and now it starts playing, and then from there I can fast forward. And it's one of those ones where you have to hold your finger down on the button. It's not broken, that's just how it operates. A lot of machines were like this at the time. Got to say though that I've got my rewind and fast forward working on this now, as well as that tape counter, so all that's working fine. But say for example I wanted to now listen to a track on the other side of this cassette. Well, you can't just pick it out of the well here, it's deep down inside there. You can't get your fingers to the sides of it, so you have to press stop, and you have to wait for it to move into the bin on the right, and now I can retrieve it and I can pop it back in, whoops, and now I can press and play side B. So yeah, as tape machines go, it's not the one that I'd want to be using day to day, so the fact that the audio on it isn't working perfectly at the moment, or hardly at all, doesn't matter to me because it's not the machine that I would be using to play tapes. Yeah, so there's quite a few issues on the audio. To list them, well, first off, it doesn't go very loud. That's maximum. and it's only coming out of the right hand channel as well, and that's whether or not I use the built-in amplifier or send the outputs off to an external amp. We get the same issue, just out of one channel. So we need to go in here and sort out the circuitry, replace a lot of capacitors and whatever else needs doing. Now, in a way, this is an early auto reverse deck. I should mention it's not the first machine that could play both sides of a tape. And especially with this one, it's a little bit unusual in that you can't just play both sides of one tape. You have to have more than one tape in the machine for it to be able to move over to the other side. So in the case of this machine, the minimum number of cassettes that it can operate on and flip them over so it can play both sides of each of them is 3. So if we were to imagine that this is a Neil Diamond and we want to play the black side, then the white side of it, well, we'll pop it in like that. We'll move on, we'll put Barry Manilow in on the top and then Engelbert Humperdinck to finish. So now we're playing Neil, but to be able to get to side B, we've got to work our way through Barry Manilow and Engelbert Humperdinck before the side B of Neil Diamond comes up. I'm having trouble remembering these names, so let's reject that one. And I'll just show you how it can do it with 3, because it just about works. So that one's got in there now. And we'll reject this one. Now I'm going to hope this is going to keep working, because they've got a habit of getting stuck when there aren't that many cassettes in. They don't push themselves down right into the bottom. Let's just see, has that one got in there? Not quite. Right, so we've got our 3 tapes now, so we'll reject the last one. So that's Engelbert going up the ramp. Here comes Neil again. Here's side B of Neil, and now we're playing it. But you can see, as far as an auto reverse deck goes, you're mixing your tapes up. You have to listen through 2 sides of 2 other tapes before you get back to side B of the tape that you started with. So there you go, that was the Philips N2401, but perhaps more importantly the 2401 plus its ski slope attachment, and this is the thing that really makes it interesting. And this attachment wasn't unique to this machine. If you were to take away that ski slope though, this would be quite an uninteresting machine from 1970, say your top-loading cassette player. Not something that would be a patch on any later cassette machines as far as the quality of playback goes, but just an interesting device for its time. Late 60s, early 70s, a lot of innovation going on in cassette players. They weren't too sure what the public wanted, so they were throwing anything at the wall to see what stuck, and this was one of those things that didn't stick to the wall. But it's the same with any technology. When there's a new piece of technology turns up, a new thing that all the people want, but the companies aren't too sure exactly which are the features that everyone's looking for, they'll do a lot of experimentation. It's like with mobile phones when those first became quite popular, and you had the StarTAC and you had that Nokia thing that popped down, that banana phone, you had the Sony one with a little mic that popped down. A lot of interesting designs during that period, and then of course now we're onto the smartphones and they all look much the same as one another. But that's not to say that those early phones are as good as the current ones. The current ones do a heck of a lot more and very well. And it's the same with cassette decks. The early ones are where all the experimentation is, where the interesting ideas are. But when it comes down to actually wanting to play your tapes on something, I wouldn't want to play them on this. I've got much better decks that came along after this one. But I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this here today. It's a rather unusual piece of technology. There was a heck of a thing to try and get working, but I think we got there sort of in the end. So that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.